Hey everyone, it's Cam here, welcoming you to another episode of The Build Room. Now, if you can see behind me, Violet Crumbles is looking a lot lighter after last week's episode, and she's going to lose a couple more kilos today. We're going to start off by pulling the doors and then pulling the interior so we've got heaps of access, and then we're going to use a special technique to strip all of that interior sound deadener off the floor so we can make sure that there's no rust that's going to come back and bite us in the butt later. So stick around and check it out. Okay, so yeah, after last week's episode, the front end is looking a little bit bare, but in this week's episode, what we want to tackle is all of this sound deadening that's on the floor. So this is like a thick mat. You can see the height of it there. There's probably about 3 millimeters in height. And this is stuck to the entire sheet metal floor in order to reduce the heat coming up through the bottom of the car and also to reduce the noise. The problem with this is you can see here around the accelerator pedal here, and if we move into the back especially, we've had water leaks that have had water run down through here, and while it would normally go out the grommet if that wasn't there, but you can see the amount of surface rust around that area. So I'm quite concerned that there may be a significant amount of rust starting underneath these panels. So the problem with removing this stuff is it's quite malleable and it's quite well stuck in most cases to the floor. So you can start by trying to get a chisel under areas like this and pop it up, and what it's going to do is break off in small pieces and leave a lot of glue behind and things like that. And you do run the risk of, if you're using a hammer and a chisel to lift all this stuff up while it's fully glued, it's going to take a lot of force and you can gouge the floor pan or even puncture it if you're not paying attention. And it's just a really difficult thing to get off, which is why people sort of tend to ignore this and don't fix the problem. But there is a solution here that'll reduce the risk and make things a little bit easier for us to actually do, and that is to use dry ice. Now I'll detail that process a little bit further into the episode, but for now the thing that we need to do is to strip the entire interior so that we can get access to the floor easily. And I'm also going to pull the doors off, mainly because I'm in the garage and I don't have a lot of room to move here between the wall and the car. So if I pull the doors off, it'll give me much easier access, and also when it comes time to fixing these areas on the cowl, I'll have much better access into this area and I can tidy up, weld, recoat, whatever I need to do here while I've got the guards and the door off. So let's pull the doors off first, because that'll make getting the interior out a lot easier. And then once we've got everything out, we'll regroup and we'll talk about the dry ice method of removing the sound deadening. Okay, so we've got the car cleaned out, given it a good vacuuming, basically so that we don't end up making mud pies when we put all this together. As I said before, there is a fair amount of surface rust. You can see in here it's not great. Around these drain bungs there, and this one especially has got some flaking metal around it. And then if we have a look over here, you can see, we'll zoom right in. Yeah, you're not supposed to be able to see daylight through the floor there. That's that's a pretty big hole that's going to take a bit to fix. And similarly, we have one in this corner here, which is equally as ugly. So we're going to have to strip all of this back section. You can see the pitting over the transmission tunnel here. We'll have to clear this transmission tunnel as well. So there's a fair bit to go here, and this section here is actually double layered as well. So, and there's a couple of bits where layers overlap. So I think we've got a bit of work to do, but hopefully it won't be too bad. And you know, this sort of quality here indicates why you don't want to start gouging at this with a chisel without first making this easy to pop off. So let's have a look at what we're going to use. Okay, so the critical point to get that sound deadener to lift off the body is getting it cold enough. So to do that, we are going to use a combination of dry ice and isopropyl alcohol. And what we're going to need to do is to smash up the granules of dry ice, which I managed to get in pellet form, if you can see there. So those are not as hard to deal with as a big block of dry ice. And also they're great for, you know, popping into your drink. Yeah. Well, we'll get this cleaned up. All right, so we'll just leave that to bubble away. So the dry ice, this is about probably 2.5, 3 kilos here. I think we're probably going to need around 8, maybe, yeah, somewhere between 7 and 10 kilos of dry ice. And I'm gonna mix it on a 2-to-1 ratio of kilos to liters. So I'm gonna try and crush that up as finely as possible so that when I put the isopropyl alcohol in and mix it up, I get kind of a paste, right? So the idea is with a paste, you're gonna get more connection with the surface, therefore a quicker and more efficient heat transfer, and you're gonna make it colder so that you don't have to wait around for, you know, an hour or two for this stuff to get it cool enough to pop. And what we should hear is, and I'll set up a camera with a shotgun mic on it so that hopefully we can hear what it sounds like. But what we're gonna hear is the contraction of the steel in the body and the contraction of the sound deadener. And as the adhesive gets colder, it will become less and less effective. We're gonna try and get it as cold as we possibly can. And at some point, we're hoping to hear a large number of crackles and pops as it basically lifts away from the surface of the steel and makes it much easier to just lift up with a chisel by hand rather than needing to use a hammer and a chisel and risk punching through that delicate, somewhat rusty sheet metal. So I'm gonna crush this up now just in a bucket. The main thing to remember when you're working with this is dry ice is extremely cold. It will damage your skin if you get enough contact with it. So wear some gloves. These are a chemical resistant glove. There's no chemical properties of this, but at least I know these are waterproof and they're rubberized, so they shouldn't transmit the cold too quickly. And glasses as well, because isopropyl alcohol, you don't want to get that in your eyes. You don't want to get dry ice shavings in your eye either. So yeah, glasses and gloves as a minimum. Whatever else you choose to do is up to you. But other than that, dry ice is pretty safe. People have been using it on Halloween for years. Delicious. So I'm not too worried about what we're going to do to the car. So let's get into it. We'll start with this main area and we'll see how we go. Right, so we can already hear some cracking, which is a good sign. I don't know if that's being picked up on the camera. I'm going to keep moving the slurry around. I think probably I've got too much isopropyl alcohol in here, I would say. It's a bit wet. I'm hoping the microphone picks this up. You just hear all that cracking. A couple of big ones. As the adhesive loses its, or goes out of its operating temperature, and the materials shrink at different rates, so it ends up popping this up. All right, that's had plenty of time to get cold. So I'm just going to see what it's like now. So, oh wow, okay. So you can see that just coming off in big clumps. That's great. So the glue's not really holding at all anymore, which is nice. Let me get my fingers under here. Wow, that's actually really easy. So I think the mix that I've made up, while it's not great for the verticals, it's certainly good for transferring the temperature. I mean, I would say, just at a guess at the moment, it's maybe been down for 5 minutes. So not a long time. Everything's coming out pretty cleanly. Oh, this will be impressive. Let's see if we can. Oh, look at that. So now that that bit's done, what I'm going to do is just see how I go up here. I'm just going to keep moving it over that. See if that helps. While that's cooling, we'll get this off. Oh, this looks like it's going to come in one piece as well. Wow, that's amazing. I've tried pulling this off before just with a hammer and chisel and it sucks. Now, I mean, that's just crazy. All right, so we'll see whether that's going to lift or not. I think it might just be smaller chunks for this bit. I'm going to move it over there. Let's get you a good view. And obviously this one's probably not going to be anywhere near as cold, so yeah, it's coming up. But certainly less liable to come off in a single piece. Oh, he says, as it comes off in a single piece. Woo! All right, that's good. All right, I'm going to see how we go with this section now. It's really starting to evaporate off now. I think this is pretty much it for this load. All right, so that was pretty easy on the other side. This side is definitely taking a lot more work, and I'd say we've just lost the temperature on it. Feeling it from the bottom, it's cold, but it's not especially cold. You know, I can quite easily just touch the bottom with my hand. Okay, so I think I'm gonna cut my losses on this side. It definitely needs another coat, but before I throw more ice onto this, what I'm gonna do is just jump onto the other side and I'll give you guys a look at what the state of the floor pan looks like over there, and then I'll just finish this off camera. Okay, so this is the other side all cleaned up, and I gotta say, it looks awesome. It looks like we've been really lucky here and there's been no water get underneath this matting. So other than areas like this little divot, so there's some rust starting just in there, and along this seam, we're okay. I think that would have rusted at some point. But other than that, I mean, even the factory undercoat here is just in tip-top shape. Now, these areas here were a lot harder to do than the flat areas because I couldn't just pull a bunch of ice on top of them and then wait until they popped off. So, like I said when I was working, I think that I made this solution too wet, and next time I'll probably put less isopropyl alcohol in. The other thing is, you really can't argue with a piece coming off this big all at once. This is the bit that sat right there. Now you can see on the other side how much that barrier wants to chip and just break away in small pieces. So when I was pulling that up, I think the glue was probably still partially active, and yeah, so it just wanted to rip up in small chunks, and that's no good. So yeah, I'm gonna get some more ice and start on the other areas, and then we'll finish up with a look at how much we managed to get off. I think there's gonna be a fair amount of weight here, so I might chuck it in a bucket and weigh it. But yeah, less talk, more work. We'll get it done. Okay, so I feel like I'm getting better at this. So I'm gonna show you one last section here, and we'll see if how big a pieces I could pull off this, and then we'll have a chat about what works and what doesn't. First thing I'm gonna do is any leftover, I've got a fresh batch of ice, but any leftover ice that I've got, I'll just pile on first. And that'll have bits of insulation and other garbage, but it doesn't matter. Now, if there's really big stuff, pull it out, but it doesn't really matter all that much. And then I'll put the new stuff on top. And what I've done here is just gone for a mixture. So not all super fine like I was hoping to do at the start. What I found was it gets too runny and it melts too quickly. So random sized particles, everything from a full pellet to sort of 2 or 3 millimeter shards is good. And the process that I've been doing is do this and put it on the vertical surfaces first because they're the hardest and you need the most ice. And if you're having trouble getting it to stick, which I have a few times, it's working quite well now, but other times what I've done is just literally just gone up and pushed it and held it with my hand. Obviously you need to have some good gloves to do this, but I'm just listening to it now. And you hear it already starting to crack, and that's it separating from the metal underneath. And I'm treating, it's a big one. I'm treating this like microwave popcorn. I sort of just leave it until the pops slow down significantly. And while that's working, I'm just gonna lift up another area. That just came out as one piece. All right, and I think the first time what I did was I left it too long. And what I did was just burn through a lot of ice. So I reckon we're good to go there. And what I'm just gonna do is move it out of the way onto another area. We'll start the next area cooling down and lifting. I'll get my... All right, that's completely separated. I'm not gonna pull it off because I'm gonna see how much I can get off this in one shot. All right, so let's just see. You can hear it still moving in here. And I'll show you a shot under the car, not of this area because I don't want to move the camera, but I took some shots earlier and you can see exactly how cold this is getting. Wow, listen to that snap. As a matter of fact, when my girlfriend saw the mist coming out some of the holes in the body, she said it actually reminded her of a dragon, and I don't think she realizes how appropriate that is for a Celica. But yeah, it's impressive nonetheless. So I'm gonna move this across now. We can work on the last side. See if this will come off. Okay. All right, we're not going to get it in one piece, but or are we? All right, let's check this out. Let me get rid of this. Back into my bucket. It's going to get dumped in the boot. And check this out. All right, that is how easy you can get it out if you get your mix right. That is awesome.
Yes, science!
Yeah, there's nothing else in here, so just gonna move this to the boot, and while I work on the boot, we'll let this dry, and then we'll come back and check out the damage. Okay, so I'm really happy with how that went. That final sheet came out as a single piece, and it didn't leave any glues or residue on the floor, so that's gonna mean a lot less effort for me to clean up later. Now, before I show you the finished product, I just want to take a second to recognize while we've been filming this episode, we've actually hit a milestone. Now, I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but we hit 1,000 subscribers. Now, I know that's not the hugest of deals. There's plenty of YouTubers out there with 100,000 or millions of viewers, but it is a big milestone when you are starting a channel, and hopefully we're gonna see that sub numbers increase a lot as we move on. Anyway, so let's go check out the finished product now. You came in a bit early there. You're cleaning this up. Okay, so this is the finished product. As I said, I am super impressed with how this came out. Sure, there are some areas where, you know, things didn't lift up quite as much as I'd like. So we've got some rubber to clean up there. And then there's the rust situation. So this really illustrates this. See this rust along the seam here, the rust that's come down. Basically the mat ends in a square around there. So this was definitely starting to rust underneath, and all along here is rusted, and that would have rusted through pretty quickly. So it was definitely worthwhile pulling all this matting up. And now it's just a case of going through. There's a pinhole in here, which may be hard to see with the light, but this is gonna have to be cut out, and there'll be stuff welded in there. But other than that, it isn't really that bad. So the next steps are gonna be to fix up the major rust holes like there, and over that side, there's one here. That's really about it that I can see so far, but more may come up as I grind this down and clean it out. We'll see. Like I said, it does look okay from the bottom, so who really knows? So yeah, in next week's episode, you can look forward to a lot more rust repair and some grinding and sanding, I'd say. There's also some weird holes here. There's no light under the car, but that's actually a hole with a brake line running across it. And there was just a silver sticker over this. I don't know why. It seems strange to me to have holes there that you then put a sticker over and then sound deadener over in order to stop it. It doesn't seem like the safest way to stop rust coming through or the elements, but it is what it is. Same with these ones up here. If anyone knows why they're open, leave a comment. I'd love to know. The other interesting thing is these little plates. So if I pull that plate out, underneath that, areas of reinforcement on the chassis that you can't really get to. Now, if we look at this one in the front, you can actually see down to the interior of the chassis rail. So there's a couple of things. Firstly, if you want to really rust-proof your car well, I would suggest lifting up your carpets, pulling those plates off, and then getting in there with some frame rust inhibitor or rust encapsulator, or there's a bunch of different products on the market, but basically you can put a long straw down there that sprays paint out of it, or a rust inhibitor, and basically drag it through and spray all of those so they don't rust from the inside out. So definitely worth doing. But for now, we'll leave this and regroup and talk about some of the lessons learned and some of the right measurements to use for this stuff and all that sort of thing. So let's cut to the workbench. Oh, and for those of you that were wondering, that's 16 kilos of underbody deadener. So if you happen to be building a circuit racer or rally car, that's 16 kilos you can do without, because race car. I will probably be putting the most of that weight back in with some new Dynamat, but yeah, such is life. I'd rather have the noise abatement. Okay, so we are done. And in summary, I did learn a lot during this process. Like I said, first time I've done the dry ice, but honestly, not too hard once you get the hang of it. And I guess if you can watch a video like this, you should be able to crack it out first time, no problems. So the tips that I would give you are, firstly, make sure you crush your ice well, but not too well. So the first time I had it almost like snow and it just evaporated very quickly, didn't last long at all. It would have been very good at temperature transfer, and in fact, that's the problem. That's why it evaporates. So dry ice is actually frozen carbon dioxide, which is why they can get the temperatures much lower than normal ice. And also when it melts, it's actually undergoing a state change into a gas. So like I said, you really want to break it down to that point where you've got a variety of different sizes, everything from like a thumb length down to sort of 3 or 4 mil granules, and that mismatch of different sizes will help it pack and stick better in certain places. You also don't want to overdo it on the isopropyl alcohol like I did the first time. So I know at the start of the episode I said 2 to 1. I would actually dramatically reduce that and actually say 8 to 1, only a quarter of what I did. Another tip I'd give you is to move quickly. Now obviously it's hard to do that when you're filming, but the reality is I spent a lot of time just watching stuff and seeing what was happening. And during that time, lots of carbon dioxide just boiled off and I went through a lot of ice. I think that you can probably get away with about 8 kilos, and if you move quickly, you'll be able to do the entire inside of the car and the boot, which is what I've done today, but I ended up using about 13 or 14 kilos. And 13 to 14 kilos is complete overkill as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're paying attention to what I'm telling you now. The other thing I would say is don't persevere with an area that's not coming up. Now, I spent a lot of time trying to dig out that passenger side rear area, and all I did was chip it to oblivion. It took a long time, it frustrated me, and in the end it took another load of ice anyway to get it off. So as I said, all up I think you need about 8 kilos of ice, and if you're mixing it to that 8 to 1 ratio, you only need a litre of isopropyl alcohol, which means you can probably get away with a setup that costs you less than $100 Australian. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that is a sound investment as opposed to trying to manually get in there and bash it with a hammer and chisel. So yeah, those are my tips. I've already told you what we're doing next week. So the last things I want to say are thank you to Kelly for being the barrel girl. Apparently it's pretty cramped in there and I don't intend to find out. And also my standard line, which is if you're new to the channel, make sure you watch the entire Violet Crumbles video here. And if you're interested in A90 Supras, you can have a look at that series here. Other than that, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time on The Build Room. Bye for now.